Computer.
There we go.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the MKO show. Obviously, we focus a lot on enhancing your metabolism, but we decided if we're going to talk about optimizing that part of you, why not talk about optimizing everything, right? So we're going to have a broad number of things we talk about. My name is Earl Mann, and I am your host for today's show. Today is actually a continuation for the very first show we did on PEMF technology, and we had such a great response, and people that had interest, and we looked at some of their questions, and we realized it was a great opportunity to expand on that conversation. So this, for those that have tuned into episode 1, this is going to be episode 2. But for those of you that are coming across this for the very first time, welcome. Welcome. I still think the information will stand on its own by itself. And we will do our best to make sure that we give enough backdrop so that it does that, right? So we have a very special guest on, Clark Henderson. He's one of our faculty members, one of our experts in many things. And he's going to be our conduit to many things that we talk about. He spent a large part of his professional career supporting functional med doctors. He has a bunch of certifications. He can tell you about that. He's a frequently attends all the different, many of the different health conferences, especially the ones that are leaning forward, like into what's across the horizon, what's coming next, and new technologies and modalities, that type of thing. But you know what, Clark? I'm going to let you introduce yourself and let people know who you are, and then we're going to get into our expanded conversation on PEMF technology.
Perfect. I appreciate you having me back on the show, Earl. I'll just kind of for people that maybe didn't hear from last time, my original background actually started off in the casino industry. And then after I went from there, I transitioned over, went through a couple different, career paths, and eventually settled on a background in nutrition. And so what I realized is that a lot of people foundationally just did not have enough information, and they just need a lot of guidance along the way. And through that, I ended up working with some really cool functional medicine doctors. I met a really lot of cool people within the biohacking industry. That's eventually how I actually met Earl himself. And then through that, like you said, I'm going to conferences all the time. I actually have another conference I'll be going to this weekend, dealing with a lot of stuff with my background. So with that, we'll be elaborating more on what the PMF technology is. Like Earl said, a lot of people had different questions about what a lot of the different frequency groups do. I know another common question is what is ORSM? And so I'll go ahead and let you kind of introduce some of those questions, Earl, and then we'll kind of
Sure.
go ahead and we'll break all those stages down for everybody here in the audience.
That's great, Clark, and I'm appreciate you coming back to continue this conversation. So, for the sake of those that might have missed episode 1, and if how about take just a moment and re-explain at a high level what PEMF technology is. For those of you that are intrigued by that, you can just go back and find our episode 1, and he gets into really detailed explanation of what that is. But we're going to focus more today on tuning in to specific frequencies and the type of effect that can have on your health, your body, a lot of different areas. So before we get into the tune up session, or the tune in session, if you will, just remind people or explain to people what PEMF technology is.
Perfect. So what it stands for is it's going to be pulsed electronic magnetic frequency. Some people also call it PEMF. And what we're doing, at least with the tech stack we're using, is we're using a Schumann resonance frequency. They combined it with infrared technology, and they combined it with 30 pounds of naturally sourced crystals. So the crystals have their own frequencies they're working with, and when it's used in tandem with the infrared heat, it actually releases negative ions. So essentially what we're doing is we're trying to combine three different tech stacks into one modality that someone can go through and use all at the exact same time. So that'd be kind of the short version of that versus the longer explanation we had in the previous grouping.
No, that's great. And if you want a deeper explanation, please go find episode 1, and we go way deep into the technology, where it comes from, NASA, rocket scientists, all cool stuff. So you should go check that out. But today, what we want to talk about is, a lot of people have this idea that it's kind of like a one size fit all type of thing, right? It's all over the internet now. It's trending in a lot of different areas. But what many people don't understand is that you can tailor make the frequency of the higher end mats. All mats won't have this capability, but the industry leading mats will have the ability for you to dial up specific frequencies. So you want to talk in general about just how different frequencies can have different effects, and then we can get into actual frequencies and what type of effects they might have.
Yeah, sure. That so what we'll do is I'll just kind of discuss the basic frequencies first, and we can kind of go through and break down what some of the different PMF, I guess you could say modulators look like.
Yeah.
The way I like to kind of go through and discuss some of the PMF frequencies is would almost be like music notes. So if you think of the frequencies like music notes, each note or each frequency is going to interact with the body in a unique way. So if you've ever gone through and you've done your scales, where maybe you start off in like a C minor versus how different, maybe a D major sounds, that's kind of going to be how the way the frequencies are going to work. So if we're looking at our lower frequencies, if we're looking at 1 through 10 hertz, those are going to be more of a calming, something more related to maybe a deep relaxation, more of a sleep and recovery setting. If we're looking at our mid-range frequencies, that's going to be somewhere between 10 hertz to 30 hertz, and that's going to potentially help with circulation, possibly tissue repair, some of your inflammation issues, so reducing inflammation. And then if we're really looking at our higher frequencies, usually more between 30 to 50 hertz, that's going to be much more of a stimulating frequency. We're going to be trying to support cognitive function, alertness, and really kind of going into energy production. And what's really cool about it is your body is going to respond to each one of those frequencies differently, and everybody's going to be different. So the way you're going to go through and react to your 10 hertz versus the way I'm going to go through and react to my 10 hertz versus somebody else is going to be different because everybody's brain states are at different points.
Oh, that's great. But and let's really get into examples of, because I know some people may be thinking now, oh man, I don't know what hertz is best for what, or I don't know what I should do. And the good news is there's an easy button. We have some preset frequency ranges. But before we get into the actual preset ranges and give people an understanding of how they can select something from a menu, let's talk about the Shom resonance, what that is, why it's
Mhm.
important, because that's really the backdrop to where these frequencies are coming from, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
So what the Schumann resonance is, so we touched on that in the previous episode a little bit, is the Earth is actually charged by lightning strikes. And what those lightning strikes do is it creates this electromagnetic field around the entire planet. And so when we talked about our astronauts or our miners going into the Earth, if you have people that go too far above the Earth or too far down below the Earth, they're no longer within the Schumann resonance anymore. And so what our mat did for the PEMF mat, they created what they call OSRM, which they have named the Organic Schumann Resonance Mimicking Technology. So essentially what they're doing is they're using the Schumann resonance, which is going to be a grounding frequency. It's going to be 7.83 hertz. They're using that as kind of their baseline, and then they're making all of their other frequencies through that range, so anywhere between 1 to 50 hertz. So what they're doing is they're trying to make sure that that pattern, that frequency, is matching with the natural earth frequency the Schumann resonance would be to where your body utilizes it to the fullest extent possible.
Okay, good. So now that so within the Schumann resonance range, we can specifically dial in frequencies that have focused effects on our bodies, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So
So
you
let's
could
just
go,
walk us through like the presets. Like somebody just wanted to know, hey, like here we have
Mhm.
a place where people can try it for themselves, but they don't have to know anything in advance, right? They can almost pick from a menu what they want to focus on, right? Do you want to just kind of walk through kind of what the standard presets could look like
Yeah, absolutely.
here? Yeah.
So the way that the mat works is you have 8 pre-done settings. So looking at that, it would be anywhere between P1 to P8. So if we start at P1, that's going to be one of our lowest settings. So that's actually going to be a sleep mode. That's going to be between 1.2 hertz to 4.5 hertz. And if you know anything about brain waves, you're actually dropping down into a delta brainwave state. So that's going to be better for deep sleep and relaxation. If you're utilizing this at home, this will be for falling asleep faster. We're going to go through and we're going to help you improve your sleep quality. So this is something that I see at the shows pretty regularly where people go on any of these settings almost, but especially the sleep mode, you'll see that they start reacting slower and they will fall asleep during the show. If you go into the next setting, that is going to be P2. That's going to be a relaxation and grounding setting. So this is going to be our true Schumann resonance, like what we talked about. So this is going to be kind of like if you're walking on the beach, if you're really trying to think of it almost like your grounding mats on steroids, right? This frequency is going to be at 7.83 hertz. This is also going to be good for reducing stress. So this is kind of one of those multifaceted stress functions. If we go up into our next stage, we're going to be looking at P3. That's going to be a concentration and meditation mode. So if anybody here in our audience is familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, if you're familiar with maybe any of the Silva meditation methods, anything like that, what we're trying to do is we're trying to put you into an alpha brainwave frequency to where you can get into a deeper meditation mode, kind of like your Buddhist monks. We're trying to go through and help you enhance focus. Creative thinking is going to be increased because we're really trying to drop you into that next modulation for your brainwave frequency. Uh, your next one after that, you're going to be looking at a de-stress mode. So with that de-stress mode, you're actually going to be going into almost kind of a lower beta brainwaves. So that's going to be a little bit higher frequency. It's going to be 14.4 hertz. This one is going to be really good though for lowering anxiety. We're going to go through and really help calm the nervous system. So even though going on the mat is really going to go through and try to activate that parasympathetic nervous system response towards really trying to make sure that all of those metaphysical tigers are going away. This is going to be one of the best modes to really make sure that that modulation goes through. Now, for me personally, my favorite setting is P5, which is the recovery mode. And that's going to be one of the higher settings. That's a higher beta brainwave setting. And it's at 39.6 hertz. And what this is for is this going to be for post-exercise muscle repair, reducing muscle soreness. So, if you're going to the gym, if you're going to like any of our biohacker places like OsteoStrong, this is going to be one of the number one recovery mode frequencies to really make sure the body recovers from that workout. Next one after that is going to be P6. This is going to be re-energize mode. So this is going to be a little bit lower than the recovery mode. You're going to be somewhere between 30 hertz to 33 hertz. You're going to be almost into some of the lower gamma brain waves on that, but this is really good for boosting energy. We're going to be going through and boosting mental awareness. So you're just going to go to kind of go through, lay down on it, and almost think of it as like a 2 minute, 2 hour nap almost. So you really kind of re-energize the whole body the whole way through. Cognitive function is going to be great. And after that, we have two special ones. We have P7, which is really it's a visualization mode, but it's really for a high-end beta brainwave frequency. So think of it as someone who needed to go through goal setting, if they needed high focus tasks they need to go through and do. It's a little bit different than your P3 concentration meditation mode because we're really trying to go through and kind of have work done versus your meditation concentration is going to be kind of more of a alpha flow creativity where you're just kind of going into flow, almost like if you've ever seen the movie Limitless, that's kind of what alpha brainwave is. The beta brainwave would be more of like, I have work I need to go through and get done, but I need to focus on it. So we're going to go through and get all these tasks all in a row, and this is going to help me stay focused on that task until they're all completed. And then the last one is P8, which is really cool. It's a combination, it's a rebalance mode. It's a combination of beta and theta brainwaves in the same one. It's going to be between 14.4 hertz to 7.83 hertz. And what this is doing is it's actually modulating back and forth between a stress regulation and a relaxation mode. So it'll keep going back and forth the whole time through that. And these are pretty much the 8 pre-done settings that are in there. And then after that, you can actually manually set it anywhere between 1 hertz all the way up to 50 hertz.
That's great. So now people understand, that it's not a come one, come all service, that
Correct.
you can be specific. I had my video going on, that you can be specific in what you want to focus energy on. But now we talked about the presets. You want to talk about how you can, there is also the potential to really dial in things away from the preset. Let's talk about some examples of what can be done in those areas. I know there's so many, we don't want to go through the entire list, but just give them an
Mhm.
idea. That way they can understand, because we have a lot of people that are interested in making decisions on should they have this mat at home. And
Of course.
I think the presets would be a good part of the reason why they might want to consider it, because you don't have to know anything, but broad kind of things you're trying to do. But now if you want to focus in on very specific things you can focus on, let people know what's possible so they can understand that.
Yeah, of course. So if we're going through the manual settings, if we're going to go through and start off at kind of the deeper end, so let's think of our musical scales again. So if we're starting off between, let's say, maybe 1 to 5 hertz, that's going to be more of that deep relaxation, healing, sleep modes. This is going to be good for sleeping, meditation, stress relief. We're going to be sitting into those delta theta brainwaves. So delta is going to be more of your deep sleep. Theta is actually going to be good for visualization. This is going to be where you're actually dreaming. If we bump up a little bit higher, if we jump up into the 6 to 10 hertz, we're going to be kind of within that true Schumann resonancy and recovery mode. So this is going to be that walking on the beach, the grounding, nervous system balance, meditation. We're going to be going more into the higher theta waves and going into some of those alpha waves to where you can really concentrate. Creativity is all going to be there. If you're manually going anywhere between 11 to 12 hertz, this is going to be kind of more for circulation and pain relief. So we're going to some of the higher level alpha brain waves. So we're going to be looking at blood flow, reduce inflammation. So that's going to be where that's going to sit at. If we go a little bit higher than that, we're going to start going into the lower beta brain waves, which is going to be between 21 to 30 hertz. We're going to be looking at tissue repair and cellular regeneration in that. So this is going to be kind of more, healing from injuries, possibly post-surgical recovery, kind of going more into that. And then once we get into that higher set, we're going to be going into the higher beta brain waves and even into some of the gamma brain waves as well, which is going to be more for mental focus, energy boosting, still recovery, but kind of a more of a higher end recovery setting. So it's going to be really good for your cognitive function, mental clarity. And what's cool about it is because everybody's different, everybody could just kind of go through all these settings on their own and then just kind of decide, you know what, today that one right there feels really good. So you might end up on a random number that's not in any of the pre-done settings. Maybe you end up at 13 hertz.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you need to go through and kind of work on some circulation, through the body. Or, today maybe, going up to, 34 felt really good today. So maybe you just need to go through and just have a slightly different recovery setting after you went through and hit up the gym. But that's kind of what's really nice about being able to manually set those frequencies is because once you kind of feel like where your body's in tune with, you can just kind of go ahead and play with it yourself and decide that's where it feels good today.
So if people do this, is it something that just happens and it changes you in the moment? Or is there a lingering effect? I mean, how long does it last? Just kind of give people an idea of, hey, if they do take the investment of time, right? Or
Hmm.
whatever to get this in the house or to go to a studio that has a PMF mat. I mean, is it just for the 20 minutes they're there that they're experiencing this, or is there something additional to that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So what we've found is the effects last roughly for about a week after it's been used. So usually full treatment time is going to be about 20 minutes, but you can go through and have positive effects from that within about 10 or so. But it's kind of like going to the gym. So if you're able to kind of go to the gym more, you keep a regular schedule and you keep going through and working out, you're going to have more gains over time, right? And I know you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Versus if you kind of only go, once, maybe twice a week, you'll still have, good returns, but it's not quite as much. So it's really kind of one of those things where the more you're able to go through and do it, as well as you're supporting your system for that recovery. So, staying hydrated, making sure you have your electrolytes to where you're supporting the whole system while it's re-energizing itself. You're going to have much better returns on that than if you just kind of go back and forth once or twice a week.
That's great. And one thing I've noticed is that regardless of what setting people try, they all comment the next time we see them on the quality of that sleep
Of
then
course.
that night. And sometimes we see people in the morning, and it's still by that night, they still have a noticeable difference in their sleep. And I'm guessing it's just because of the dramatic decrease in their stress levels, right?
Oh, most definitely. So a
Yeah.
lot of people, just because they're chronically stressed, once you go through and you really remove those stressors, it's amazing how much better you can go through and sleep at night when there's not much to really go through and worry about to where your body's not constantly responding to that all the time.
Yeah. And I know in your practice in supporting one of your functional medical docs, I think didn't you guys, I know you had a focus on athletes and recovery. You want to just kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, correct. So, where my doc was first introduced to it was with one of the sports teams he worked with. They had actually had a PEMF table that they'd bought back in the late 2000s, which cost them roughly about 30,000-ish dollars or so. It was very expensive, and they had to buy multiple units. So that was his starting point of kind of like one of his introductions to the tech and seeing just how well it worked with his athletes. The secondary stage he went to is he also bought a PMF table for his personal practice, which cost him roughly about $10,000 ish. He said that one actually worked a lot better than the one that he had with the sports teams. The technology had come a lot further, and he was able to see really good results with that with his patients. And then when I introduced him to the new mat that we were working with, he was blown away because he said the technology that was involved in this, how
Mhm.
everything was stacked together, and the price point for it was way better than anything he had previously used and the price point was amazing to where he's like, this is way more accessible to a lot of the everyday people versus, going through and buying a $30,000 table that you can only get as a sports team or, some kind of a bigger facility of some sort.
Yeah, just to put some context around that example you just gave, like what level of athletes were you talking about in that example? Were they like high school, college, pro, what? I mean, just,
Well, we're talking about pro
yeah.
athletes. So these were people that were at the top of their game
Okay.
in their field that would be considered some of the most eminent people within their industry that he was going through and treating and having on these tables for treatment plans.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully people got a lot out of this. I think for people, especially if you saw episode one and this combined, you should really understand why we mentioned it on the first broadcast that some of the leading biohackers and health influencers were asked, the top five things that they do consistently as a part of their lifestyle, like what would be the things they would not like to do without. To my surprise, a good percentage of them said, that PMF mat, and these were people that have the means and they're in the business of doing everything, right? From cold
Correct.
plunge to peptides and all these different nutritional things and all these things. They all kind of fell back on just the general everyday value or consistent value of using PMF technology. And I think that's just a testimony to how stressed we are in modern living, right?
Oh, most definitely.
And if people do any research on the negative effects of persistent stress, you will definitely add something to your lifestyle to help you mitigate that, whether it be meditation, some type of exercise program, something. Because persistent stress, we're not designed for that. We're just not equipped for that, as our biology is not designed to be in constant fight or flight, and there's a escalating negative chain reaction that results from us living in that world all the time. And my take is that modern living is that there is no way to have a modern life and not to be under some type of persistent, never-ending stress. And a lot of people think, stress is, oh, I'm in the middle of a crisis, or I'm in danger at the moment. But it's not just that. As we talked about on the first broadcast, it's sitting in traffic, is wondering what's going on with your job, your boss, what's going to happen next week with the economy, that stuff, those things that you saw on the news, just all of these things are thrown into this big bucket of persistent stress that we have to find a way to deal with. And some people are realizing that, either finding a place that has a PMF mat and making it a part of my weekly habits, where I pull in and I get kind of like super de-stressed for the week, or the people that just want to have it in their home just because they just want to make that type of time and investment. They want it to be that accessible. But the testimony for people that have incorporated PMF into their life is pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
Absolutely. I agree with that the whole way through. I definitely would have to say that with I think how society has been structured, part of how they're doing it is they're creating stress on purpose. So whether you are aware of it or not, that's how you can kind of start going through and evaluating your relationship to those stress factors
Uh,
with, if you start including PMF and, maybe a couple other lifestyle changes where you can kind of go through and start really mitigating those and trying to increase your health in that range. So this is definitely something I know that I found super helpful for me personally. So I can only imagine what you go through and do for other people as well.
And that decline of stress on the mat is so rapid. We've actually seen people come in here and 10 minutes on that mat and they're almost falling asleep. It's just like
Yes.
their stress just goes over the cliff, right? And just they get so relaxed so fast that they just almost start napping sometimes. It's really interesting to see.
No, most definitely.
Well,
So
Clark, I really appreciate you coming back in. Next time we team up, it might be a different subject, but I appreciate you taking a little bit deeper dive on how people can not only tune in to the value of a PMF mat or a technology wherever they find themselves, but they can also tune up, right? They can tune into specific things that they want to focus on, whether it be
yes.
concentration or recovery, et cetera. So thank you so very much. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope you got something out of that. As always, we invite you to, if you have any interest in the broad area of health and wellness, we probably, between us and our contacts and our faculty that I'm going to be introducing you to you, we either know a person or know a person that knows a person. So we can probably get an expert on almost anything health related to be on our show. And what we will use as the gauge is if we get a lot of people asking for the same type of thing, we will do a show on that very thing, right? So thanks again for tuning in. Clark, thank you so much. And everybody, have a great day.